and we're back starting again on the podcast. And obviously, we're all about retail. We're talking to different people in retail sectors, and I suppose an expert in their own right and understanding different perspectives. And I'm really excited to talk to Owen Clifford today. He is head of retail for Bank of Ireland, and I'm just really interested to see, I suppose, Owen, first of all, to get an introduction from yourself, and then we can
Perfect.
dive in and talk a little bit about retail and what we're seeing. So, Owen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Louise, and thanks a million for having me on your show. Look, first of all, I'm a Kerry man, exiled in Cork. I've led Bank of Ireland's retail proposition now for the last 9 years. So time has absolutely, couldn't believe it actually when I was thinking back, it's 9 years. And I'm part of what's a wider sector team in Bank of Ireland. And I suppose just to give a bit of background in terms of the sector team, Louise, we're all, we're all recruited directly from our individual from our individual sectors and industries. So one of the root causes, I suppose, of financial crisis going back in 2008 was that too many banks, financial institutions, that they were accused of having their backs to the window and not getting an external view, or not speaking with customers enough, or operating within their own echo chamber. So how Bank of Ireland addressed that was by putting in place this sectors team. So look, as I said, we're all really passionate about our industry. I like to think sometimes that we're a bit like the Avengers of Irish banking, without the costumes or the superpowers, obviously. But it's a unique proposition, and I'm really delighted to be part of it, because it allows me to be an advocate for the Irish retail sector, meeting and engaging with retailers across the 26 counties on a daily basis. And unquestionably, that's the best parts of the role, because if you speak retailers' language, I think you can build a relationship. And for me, it's not about the hard sell with products or anything like that. It's about developing relationships that are long term, that are sustainable, and that when retailers do need funding or do need a sounding board or a different perspective, that I'm there for them at the other end of the phone, or to meet them in person. And I suppose that's the one thing that I would say around me, getting out and about, Louise, is that you learn from meeting on the shop floor. You're not going to learn about retail. You're not going to find out what's happening, what's current, sitting behind the desk. So I'm not a house cat by any means. So the last couple of years, post COVID, it's been great to get back on the road again. And the range of retailers that I meet as well. Look, I'm meeting with multi-store corporates to one store entities. So it's such a range and such a diversity of retailers that are out there. And look, I'm really looking forward to I've been out and about already, but really looking forward to what 2024 brings.
Yeah. I suppose kind of the consumer sentiment at the moment, Owen, and I suppose you'll probably know this because you're speaking a lot, is there's a little bit, I suppose, and I suppose social media is probably driving a little bit of a fear there with a lot of the retailers. I suppose what I'm hearing is the minimum wage has gone up.
Yeah,
And obviously, some are struggling because when we give the minimum wage an increase, that impacts then what the supervisor's salary are and the hourly rate for the rest of the management team. And that's
yeah,
obviously for those retailers that maybe they're a food retailer or a pharmacy retailer, and maybe they have two or three sites. And now they have to look at maybe pay restructuring in the business. And I suppose the worry is they're kind of wondering where the costs, where they can actually, I suppose, pull back on other areas of the business. What are the kind of trends, I suppose, that you're seeing currently, Own? And I suppose, is there anything that we can learn from other markets in
yeah.
Europe in how to alleviate those kind of, I suppose, challenges that they're having? Because I always think there's solutions out there if we think outside the box a little bit. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's looking at how other people do things in a different way, perhaps.
Yeah, look, I fully hear you, Louise, in terms of the sentiment piece. And I suppose, yeah, it goes without saying. And first of all, I'd start off by saying how pivotal the retail sector is to the Irish economy.
Yeah.
With my accountant's hat on, like, it's generating 30 billion in sales annually, 12% of our GDP, 300,000 people employed, and internationally we're recognised for our really high standards, and Ireland remains a really attractive market for for retailers to come in. And I think that's what's it's in terms of the standards that are there. We've seen an entrepreneurial type ownership model in Ireland, where people own and operate their own business, and then you've got that with the international retailers coming in, and it's really risen the standards.
Yeah.
Look, I start from I have to start, I suppose, by mentioning that's the positive side that's out there, because you're quite right. In a lot of the media at the moment, it's focusing on the negative side of things. Look, we're seeing, if there's a one store closure, some commentators are, I call it it's a bit like chicken licking commentary. They're questioning the future of bricks and mortar. They're actually questioning the future of the sector in general.
And we seen that in 2019. Oh, sorry to cut in there, but I seen that in 2019 where, pre-COVID, where, if I look at the likes of Rituals Cosmetics, they came into the Irish market, and they opened the store in Galway that I was a part of. And looking back, they increased their store portfolio. They now operate, I think they have, is it maybe 16, 17 stores in the Irish market, and they're a global brand. I think they're estimated 1 billion euro on the stock market. So the point I'm making is, everyone was saying that, Debenhams are gone, this is gone, and then we see a Dutch brand, and it's, from my perspective, I hear the people saying it, but I'm seeing a very different perspective on the ground. Now I know it's different. They're different categories.
No,
there is opportunities.
We need to be careful, Louise, because look, the challenges are there. Unquestionably, there are challenges. Like, not for a minute am I sugarcoat. You've got supply chain issues that they've raised their head again in the last month or so. The cost base that you mentioned, the consumer sentiment is fluctuating the whole time, linked to social media, linked to what we're seeing, and then you've the antisocial behaviour as well that we saw around Thanksgiving Day in Thanksgiving evening in Dublin. But I think you need to have balance without sugarcoating, because at the moment, when you've got full employment and you're struggling as a sector to recruit people, the last thing you want is that it's all negative that's in the media or in commentary around the sector. Because if you're somebody that's trying to choose your career, where are you going to look at it? If you're saying, right, this is a sector that's under pressure, this is a sector that all of the commentary we're seeing isn't positive, well, then you're going to struggle to get the right people. And if you struggle to get the right people, it has a domino effect, unfortunately, because that'll result in poor customer service, disengaged customers. And then you'll start struggling. So I think that balance is needed. And look, said at the outset, I'm meeting retailers the whole time. I've met 150 to 170 retailers over the last 12 months. And I suppose the mood, I'd say, is kind of cautiously optimistic, Louise. And there's that's linked to their own performance, but it's also linked to the wider economic things that are out there. We've got population growth. It's the first time since the 1840s that our population is greater than 5 million. We've got full employment, and we've got savings levels, personal savings levels are at an all-time high. Yes, they're starting to be eaten into over the last 12 months, but they're still at an all-time high. And the CSO data as well, like that aligns with that. We're seeing that 22 and 23 very strong from a sales volume perspective, and very, very strong compared to 2019. You referenced 2019. We're seeing the sales volumes are nearly double digits increase compared to 2019.
And that's in the retail, I suppose. Those stats you're getting.
Completely.
Okay.
Like the population growth is one that's I suppose that's interesting, because it links to your point around new retailers coming in. In the last since 1997, our population has grown by 40%. So the EU average is 5%, and the next closest is Spain at 20%. So at that growth, and like we have, when you think of new shopping centers being built or there hasn't been any in probably 20-25 years. So if you're an international retailer and you're looking in at a market, you're going, right, we've got low unemployment, we've got strong savings levels, we've got a growing population. This is a market that, the data science that they use, it's very, very sophisticated in terms of, we're going to move it. If we're going to choose a location and move into a location, and
Mm.
that's one of the reasons that they're coming to Ireland. Like and there's probably a domino effect with that, because if we've seen the likes of Lego
Mm-hmm.
have gone on to Grafton Street, and that has performed really, really well. So that means now that there's more international retailers that are looking at city centre again, where previously they might have been looking at just the regional parks or looking at suburban locations, where now they're going, right, there's an opportunity here for us to go back into the city centre in Ireland, be it in Dublin, be it in Galway, be it in Cork. And we're seeing the likes of Decathlon, IKEA, Mont Blanc, Lululemon, all of these international retailers. And it's a change, because there was definitely an over-reliance, Louise, on the UK mid-tier fashion retail in Ireland for too
Yeah.
long. And
Yeah.
now it's good for us, the consumer, because we've got more diversity in terms
Mm-hmm.
of the proposition that's out there. But from a landlord perspective as well, they're getting more comfortable now with the retail proposition, and they're saying, right, and being a little bit more pragmatic as well. If we can bring in the right type of retailer into this area, it'll bring more footfall in, and then other retailers will come along as well, and the complementary retailers. So we're seeing landlords being a little bit more pragmatic as well, and that's opening doors for Irish retailers to get high profile locations where maybe 10, 15 years ago the rent levels were way too high and they wouldn't have got them. So, they're getting an opportunity with a pop-up shop, an opportunity maybe with turnover based rent, an option to lease or whatever. And it means that we're seeing more engagement for those retailers on the high street than what we would have previously.
Yeah. What's happening within our European counterparts? How does the Irish retail sector fare compared to the rest of Europe? Are we trending up? Are we what are we how are we looking?
It's in general, it's actually quite similar. Look, from a
Mm.
sales perspective, we're performing probably a little bit better in terms of sales volume increases. But if you're looking at the overall sector and how the sector has changed, and the where retailers are locating, it's quite similar, Louise. Like the renaissance in terms of suburban and regional stores post COVID, that's something that we've seen across all of Europe. It's not just in Ireland. So the occupancy levels now in terms of shopping centres in Ireland, or sorry, even the vacancy levels, if I flip it, the vacancy levels for shopping centres are 3.5%, and for regional park they're 4%. So we're very, very, very full in terms, and there's an appetite for retailers to come in, and that's similar. That's the similar type of profile we're seeing around Europe as well. The city centre, the recovery has been slower, but it is starting to recover. And I think that maybe in Ireland we're probably a little bit behind some of the European counterparts in terms of the development of our city centres. And what we're seeing with retailers here now is that they're maybe adopting that more European or international perspective, where less is more, and where previously they might have had maybe 4 or 5 shops around the city centre. They're pulling back, and now they're having just maybe 1 or 2 flagship stores with a focus more on the experience, as opposed to just the sales level. And you haven't seen less stock in terms of some of those city centre stores. And I think they're nearly being a gateway, actually, Louise, for the region, for regional suburban stores, or for the online offering. So that's something that across internationally and in Europe we would have seen more of. Where I think in Ireland we were a bit slow to adopt that. The other area is around the mix that's in our city centres. In Ireland it was very much retail focused on its own, where internationally we're seeing more hospitality, more entertainment, more residential in terms of our city centres. So a greater mix to drive footfall in. It's essentially the living city. Look, we've heard about the living city, and it's been bandied about in terms of Ireland and what are we going to do about it. But that is more advanced. Look, there was an example of John Lewis in the UK, where I suppose they felt, right, we've an overuse of retail with some of our stores. We need to realign them, and so they converted some of the upstairs in their stores to residential. Being very, very smart then with that, they fitted them out with their own furniture. So that's brand engagement straight away. And then because they've got a sister brand from a grocery perspective in Waitrose, if you're renting there, well, you were going to get a discount if you did your grocery shopping in Waitrose. So just being really smart and bringing everything together. And we'd have seen then in some, I suppose, that entertainment piece is around the crazy golf, a retail outlet with it, the hospitality, hostels, that type of operation. Not seeing that, hadn't seen that in Ireland. Now it's interesting to see some of the plans for Stephen's Green, for the shopping centre. They're going to include some of that. So I think, we're slowly getting there in terms of it, but it's the overall, I suppose, and from the economic foundations in terms of the Irish economy, that is probably the key differentiator. We're performing better than some of the European cities. So it's seen from an international perspective, Ireland is seen as an attractive location. That's why people are coming here,
I suppose I'm listening to you there, just, I suppose, talking about different ways that I suppose retailers are propositioning their businesses, from I suppose a branding piece with the, this is our flagship store, pulling back maybe the old fashioned, we'll fill it up and it'll sell, because obviously that's and that's consumers' behaviors have changed, so we've had to adapt to that. What do you see, I suppose, from discussing those kind of, I suppose, aspects of the entertainment piece? You talked about the Lego store and different things like that. What do you feel, if there's SMEs listening out there, what do you feel they need to adapt more of in order for them to, I suppose, to see a change in how their business operates? I find with the SMEs are it's a slower sell. They're slower to change, especially the smaller ones. I suppose, is there any low-hanging fruit that you've seen through your visits with, you said 170 retailers? Is there any low-hanging fruit that the retailers listening to this now can maybe go away and maybe think about, or take maybe some action to doing around that?
Perfect. I think from the last couple of months when I've been meeting retailers, what I've been saying to them, it's let's do more for 24 is the mantra I've been using. I noticed that Operation Transformation stole my thunder in the last couple of weeks, but I won't be going down any copyright infringement or anything like that with RT on it. I think there's enough on their plate. But what does more in 24 mean? Look, for M is about margin management, and I think it's about, look, there's probably sometimes an over focus in terms of price, and look, that's unsustainable. I think retailers, they have to be really careful around not diluting their margins, so demonstrating the value that their product brings. So be it and upselling and really communicating in terms of the quality, in terms of the provenance, the service, all of those aspects, really, really important. So just that and getting into it in a granular fashion from a margin perspective around their products as well. Looking at the product range that they have, just because they've always had it, is that the right thing? Is there a case that they can actually pull back sometimes? And it's a hard thing to do in terms of the number of SKUs that they have, but then think of the benefits around that. That gives them more leverage sometimes if they're buying more of one, or they can have more leverage opposite the suppliers then, and pass that on to the customer again from a value perspective. The other area then is around O, from MO. So O is omnichannel. And with omnichannel, some people get really frightened when they hear about omnichannel. What's this about? Essentially, it's about making sure there's consistency between the online offering and the physical store. That's essentially it. Integrating from your purchasing all the way through to your after sale. And I have the most conversations I have with retailers is around omnichannel and personnel. Being honest with you, they're the two. But
I'm actually going to pause you on that, because the omnichannel is something I actually wanted to bring up with you, and I'm glad you actually brought that up now, Owen, because I think COVID forced a lot of the Irish SMEs, really pushed them into it. And I think the government done a great thing with the online voucher piece. It really helped them get up their e-com with their retail outlet, and that's been brilliant for them. And it's probably good that happened in a way, because it got them then into another channel, another way to actually make money for their business,
Absolutely.
whereas they only have that one channel. And I think it was that kind of resistance to change that I touched on there a few minutes ago. There is that fear factor a little bit around that. With the omni channel, I suppose, and a lot of the retailers that I talk to, they are, I suppose, they're caught in a bit of a loophole because they're seeing maybe some people sell, through it could be Instagram shops, and
Yeah,
then they
yeah,
change the algorithm, and then they're like, they're not getting the sales, and then they go down another avenue, and then they're paying for Facebook ads, and they're just getting so overwhelmed with the amount of information out there. Okay,
yeah,
but
yeah.
sometimes too much information can actually be, I suppose, set you back further because you're
Correct. Yeah.
overwhelmed,
Correct.
and might procrastinate, or you might find it hard to really, I suppose, make those critical decisions that you need to make.
Yeah.
Um, what's your kind of take on that? Because obviously, what I'm seeing is that probably they don't understand the market they're going after properly. So they think all of the customers are their customers. So they're not probably narrowing that down to what platform the customers are actually on and how to
Yeah.
actually speak to them. And another thing is I think the consensus I got off a couple of SMEs was on, when we close the door at 6 o'clock, we also close our online shop.
Hmm.
And I had to have a few tough conversations where it's, the business, if we're online, you're selling 24/7. That doesn't mean
Oh,
you're there
completely.
on the laptop
Yeah.
24/7, but we need to be really thinking in terms of that, from, getting orders out, really being mindful of that and creating an experience around that. The customers will want to shop at you again. We know we're not an Amazon. We're not set up logistically to be an
Yeah.
Amazon as a country at the moment with
Yeah.
the next
Completely.
day
Completely.
delivery. So we're actually very lucky in Ireland. When I was in the US, they're on a whole nother level. You nearly get your Amazon delivery within a couple of hours, so
Yeah. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
here. If I order something on Amazon and I'm in the west of Ireland in Galway, I'd be lucky to have that within 2 weeks, so
Yeah.
a lot of people are worrying, and I think there's so much potential right now because those SMEs are actually Amazons, because their turnaround time is a lot quicker than
Yeah.
what we have. And we don't have those big players in the market at the moment. But I suppose going back to what I initially wanted to touch on is those channels, those kind of challenges they're having. What solutions, or what are you working with the retailers on how to come up with maybe a process or an approach to try and help them understand that a little bit better?
Yeah, look, that's, I think you touched on an awful lot of the points there, Louise, which are out there. And I think when we were speaking about online, and when I'm speaking with retailers about online, it's about bringing it back to basics, and having putting that framework in place that allows them to get the most out of it. And I think consistency is absolutely key. The big issue is that they were in silos. They were operating completely in silos, because you're right, during COVID, through necessity, they set up online. Physical store went off and did its own thing. And what actually was happening, that it was driving inefficiencies within the business, in terms of the online piece was off to one side, the physical store on the other. And I equate it sometimes like, if you have, you're meeting a friend that you haven't seen in ages, and you're bringing the kids with you. It's like a play date. You just say, look, let them off, they'll be fine. Even though they've never met. So that structure wasn't put in place to allow both of them to integrate properly. So it's going through it step by step to make sure that there is real integration all the way through the supply chain, from purchasing to the after sale service, to make sure that there is that consistency piece in place. And then it's about utilizing what you have and utilizing the strengths that you have. And look, a couple of examples that I have seen is around the really generating what is like micro fulfillment hubs, we call them, but that's just converting your store to make sure that the individual stores are equipped and integrated with the online offering. And that's getting back to the point that you mentioned. There was dealing with a retailer who had stores around the country, but if you ordered online from Galway, it was going to be shipped from Dublin, as opposed to being shipped from a store if they had a store in Galway. What we saw is, when they integrated that properly, using a very simple IT, by making sure that somebody orders online, it pings within the nearest store. That store then was able to ship and fulfill the order to the person in Galway. So a couple of benefits for the customer: quicker delivery. If they want to return, they know they can go into the physical store very quickly. There's not going to be any charge with that, and it's up to the retailer then to actually upsell once they come into the store. The benefits for the retailer, better carbon footprint. We're speaking, the delivery is less. Instead of coming from Dublin, it's going from the store in Galway to your home. And critically, because this was causing a lot of issues, no doubling up on stock. They're actually being really efficient in terms of using their stock, as opposed to having stock in the central warehouse, stock in the store. So it's that integration piece is the key. That's the key thing. And I suppose another thing I'd have seen that's been really smart about it was a retailer couldn't crack online. They were saying, look, we've put in chatbots, we've put in AI, we've tried a lot of different things, we just can't seem to crack it. What they decided was they had one underperforming store. This was in the home subsector, one underperforming store. So they decided, right, we're going to put webcams into the store that's underperforming. So now if you want to order something from that retailer online, you're speaking with a person in a physical store who can point out exactly the different products, can engage with you. They know the system, they know each of the individual products, they know what'll work, what'll go together, nearly giving you an interior design workshop while you're speaking with them.
Yeah.
And just sales have increased phenomenally. So you've got a shop that was struggling, a physical shop that was struggling, is now sustainable, and you've got an online store that wasn't working, and now people are coming towards it because they're saying, right, we're dealing with people. And I think the big thing around Omnichannel is around engaging the people, because there was that element of, we're going to go online, and there was that hesitancy with the staff as well around, how am I going to work with this? And if you don't, you can have the best system in the world, but it's a bit like giving somebody who cycled all their life a Ferrari. If you don't teach them how to drive, it's not going, they're not going to get there any faster.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
the training piece, like that's it's absolutely massive at the moment in terms of
even
of
retaining
retail.
staff, I think, Owen, what you're touching on there, because I think that the market at the moment, with the workforce coming in at the moment, has a higher expectation, Owen, than what they had
Correct.
15 years ago. And we've seen a lot of, I suppose, I suppose you could say the longer term kind of staff when COVID hit, especially in the retail sector in Ireland, a lot of those long serving managers actually left the market. And we're now seeing a very different group of middle management in the retail sector. They're a lot younger and they're very ambitious. They want to be engaged in the workplace, and they want to know why am I doing this? Share the KPIs with them, give them that training. And I think whereas years ago, I think the thinking on it was, you kind of were thrown in the deep end in a retail store and you're expected to sink or swim. Okay. So you're throwing them onto tills, go off there now. If you have a customer complaint, you're trying to figure it out. And I think that isn't actually going to work anymore, because if you put the newer the emerging Gen Zs into that situation, they're going to say to you, no, I can go somewhere else and get really good training. Why would I stay here?
No, that's the point. Yeah.
So they'll walk away. So we're seeing that. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a change. Like the way consumer behaviors change, the employees' behaviors are changing rapidly. The retailers that don't actually get on board with those behavioral changes and change how they manage their teams will be left with staff that are unengaged, not enthusiastic, and people that don't want to come into work, and people that are really just working for a pay packet. So they've no investment in the company. They don't really buy into the vision, because they haven't been bringing them along to get them bought into the vision by supporting and nurturing that culture within the business.
Yeah, and you touched on it. Culture is the key thing. And look, the one thing when I'm meeting retailers that in terms of they looking for new funding, right? So we say that getting to the nuts and bolts, the retailer comes to me and they're saying, right, what's the most important thing? I think the first thing that I'm looking at is in terms of the financials. The first thing I'm looking at is what's the development plan for their staff, because it's absolutely critical at the moment, given that it's given with such a shortage. What type of training is being put in place? Is there something really passionate about? How are you growing your staff opportunities? Is there a career for them there? are you broadening their skill set because the skill set is evolving and changing the whole time? What about the life skills? Bringing, that you have to think about creating a team spirit, that it's not just about work. What about life skills for them so they can develop as well? And there's definitely in some of the retailers that I meet, there's a disproportionate focus on recruitment as opposed to actually developing the people that they have.
Yeah,
and I think
succession planning, I think, succession planning. And retailers, I think, when we look at succession planning, I think for them it's an abstract idea. And if we look at the bigger companies, the med tech, all of them, they do succession planning. The IT companies do it really well. And I say to retailers, succession planning, basically, if that manager that's here 30 years leaves and they've all of that knowledge and they walk out the door.
Correct, yeah.
What are you left with? You're left with a team that weren't shown how to take in a delivery, that weren't shown how to, do a void on a till. All of these kind of basic day-to-day, runnings of the business, because they don't see it as important. And I think there's a little bit of firefighting going on. And kind of reactive as opposed to being proactive in that space. Yeah,
I completely I agree with you from a succession. The one thing I'm always saying is, how would you carve success out of succession? And the big thing around it is there's too much of a focus on ownership succession, and that's important. That's really, really important. But operational succession is equally important, and that type of that mentoring. How are people in a position to step up, to remove that vacuum that you spoke about? That's really, really, really important. And I think it's even more important given that the type of consumer that's out there at the moment, they have zero patience, zero loyalty. So if standards start to slip, they don't care that, we're in an interregnum between managers. They'll give you one chance, they'll give you two chances. If it's not there, they'll move on. And I think it's especially in Ireland, given that one of the benefits of and one of the real differentiators of us as a retail market is there is an opportunity to move into ownership. So a lot of managers will want to move into store ownership themselves, and they see that as their growth plan. So if you're not developing the next people to come up from a management perspective, you're leaving yourself wide open that you'll get that notice saying, I'm taking over my own store, because that probably drives, especially in grocery and convenience, there people that are in across all the sector are looking at maybe having their own store and growing in that, and that's why they got in the first place. So if you're not putting the succession planning or the training in place, well, it's going to be very, very difficult when those people then move on.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point you've made, Owen. You've really good stuff there coming out. I'm listening to you, and I'm trying not to jump in because I'm getting a bit excited what you're saying, because you touched on something there that I think is, and when I do a podcast with someone, I go, right, is there any tangibles we can take away from the conversation and possibly look at implementing in the business? Because for me, it's about taking the action and seeing if there's anything there. And I think you touched on something there. And I spoke with a business in Kildare a few months ago, and they're actually doing a buy-in option for their staff, which I thought was a fantastic idea. And you touched on it there when you said about, these grocery retailers building it into the succession plan where they're going to hopefully, take ownership of that. But I think there's other options there. Many years ago, I worked in Next, and I was in their share saver scheme. I bought shares and I doubled. And I sold my shares, obviously, because I was younger at the time, so I wanted the money.
Of course.
I made such a profit from it, and it was, and I remember every Monday morning we go in for our manager meeting, and we would go into that manager meeting, and top of the agenda would be, how's our shares performing in the business? After that conversation, we go into the KPIs, we go, right, how are we doing? How's our productivity targets? How's our payroll? And we'd have a big meeting. But that was a real driver for success. Correct. And we felt we were part of the success story. So I think something for retailers to think about today is that having that, I suppose, that perspective that there is these other ways to get buy-in from your team, that they're bought into your company, bought into your vision and the future of it. For down the road.
It is. Look, that piece, that communication piece, look, it's a cliche, but that is really, really important. That you have to treat your staff the same way you're treating your customers, and have them bought in bought into the strategy, if they feel that they're a part of it, because they there's loads of incentives there in terms of, employee benefits, but it's about feeling that there's growth, and that there's feeling that there's an opportunity for them. I think that is even more important. Like, in one area that I've seen a lot, where the best revamps that take place in a store, when somebody decides to do a revamp, is where there's been staff buying, where the staff have been really involved from day one in terms of planning, execution, and then even more critically, reviewing it and avoiding what I call the Cinderella revamp, where it's just all the focus is on doing, then you cut the tape and clock strikes 12 and it's gone back to the way it was. That's what happens when people aren't engaged, or where staff haven't had an opportunity to be involved. They don't feel a part of it, and they don't feel like it matters to them if it works or not. Where when they recognize and it's clear and clearly communicate to them the investment that's been put in terms of a store revamp, and the benefits that can accrue when it's delivered correctly for themselves, in terms of the role and the sustainability of the business. That's when you can see the magic really happening, and when people get really excited about it. So I think that communication piece it can't be underrepresented, or it can't be. We just have to focus on it as a sector, because it's so competitive. And if you don't have that buy-in from your staff, or people don't want to be part of it, or don't see retail as a career, that's when the difficulty is going to come. And I think from a lot of retailers themselves, they're probably the smaller retailers, they can feel a little bit isolated, a little bit lonely out there, and it is tough at the moment. And they're going, right, it's fine. You're in an organization. There's 10,000 people. You can hop ideas off people. What do I do in this type of situation? Yeah. And what I'd always say is, look, it's about creating your own team around, and taking the time as a retailer to see different perspectives. Get a mentor, speak to other retailers, have somebody as a sounding board. That's the best investment that you can make with your time. It gives you a bit of space as well to move away from the business and to look at it. Because at the moment, when I speak to a lot of retailers and they're comparing their business, they're just comparing it with the business that's just down the road, or a business that's within their own small subset. They're not getting an opportunity to actually go out and see what's happening on a wider basis across the sector, or across different sectors. And if you think of it from the perspective of a customer, we're just not looking at, when we come into a store or we engage with the stores online, we're just not thinking about that subsector. We're thinking about the experiences that we have on a daily basis across multiple subsectors. So they're the standards that we expect at the moment. It's a much smaller world now. So I think having a support structure, and trying to get that support structure, that's the best investment they can do. Getting some mentors in place, having somebody that'll come in, a different voice, maybe with their staff as well, to energize their staff. All of those really, really, really important. But it takes time, and it takes retailers giving themselves that time, or else it's the alternative is just getting burnt out. And too many times I've seen retailers who are trying to cover everything themselves, and then eventually they just get disengaged and disillusioned because they've no time for themselves. So it's really important that they try and make that time for themselves when in a really busy and competitive market.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on there, I think, was this working in silos. And I think that has been habitually the way it has been for a while. I'm involved in the chambers here in Galway, I suppose, and other kind of organizations, but it's sometimes hard to get the retailers to get feedback. So sometimes the supports are there, and I'm a big advocate. If they ask, that you can help, but if we're not being vocal on and asking, then
completely.
It's always going to be a no if you're not never asking, because it'll never be a yes unless we actually ask the question. So I think that's a really good point you've raised, and something that I think a lot of retailers listening to this look at leaning in, like we do in work. If anyone is in the workplace, leaning on others for that support, for that bouncing things off, and getting that mentoring or kind of support or working group going within your local community of retailers, so you can talk about the challenges you're having, even go to your local council. Is there any kind of shop local campaigns? There is funding there available. but we're
completely.
not having enough conversations in order to get to that place
Yeah,
for the
completely.
seat at the table. So I think that's really important to do. I'm going to bring back, because I did interrupt you. You were telling me an acronym you use, Colmore. We've done margin, we've done omnichannel. I'm going to get you to tell us the other two.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to finish this call without finding out what they are.
Yeah, well, R is for, look, we touched on it, is recruitment and
Yes.
retention, more importantly,
Yeah.
of your staff. That's the key. What are you putting in place around that? And I think making the job a more enjoyable experience. And the development plan is one, but also being
Mm.
smart. Use automation. Use automate. Look, some people, again, they balk in terms of automation, but it's really, look, some of it can be just very, very simple. It's retail is manually intensive. There's manually intensive tasks across some subsectors. I've seen the difference. I've seen in some stores where they've even put in electronic shelf labels. The time that is freed up in terms of
Yeah.
having to actually change every time there's a different offer. So being smart with the use of automation to give it a more enjoyable experience for staff. I think that's important, and having the development plan. And then the last one is E is for engagement, retail 101, with engagement with customers and engagement with suppliers. And I think the suppliers piece is even more. The customer is a given, and I think the retailers recognize that. But sometimes it's about getting back to basics, the basics of retail. That there's been numerous studies on what do customers want to come back to a store: service and standards, accessibility, and value. So the service and standard piece, that's all about your people and having engaged people.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, and you're keeping engaged with your customers, that's really, really important. From the supplier perspective, it's something that probably hasn't been the level of focus that needs to be there. And I think what I'm seeing with some retailers now is that they're diversifying their supplier base, and it's really important when you see the issues coming around the Red Sea.
With the
And that's causing it. So what can we do? We need a contingency in place. So what retailers are doing in some instances, they're nearshoring their supply base, having more of their suppliers in Europe, and thankfully more of their suppliers in Ireland as well. So I think that's a key area, and that there has to be balance in terms of negotiations with suppliers as well. Some retailers would have a reputation, they go very hard on the suppliers, and that can, if your suppliers don't, when I'm looking at small Irish owned suppliers here, and they feel that, God, we have to do what the retailer does, or we have to agree to that price, but that becomes unsustainable for them, and that doesn't work either. Like, we need to have that virtuous circle of trade where people recognize that balance is required in the relationships, and that means then that you have a functioning economy, which a functioning local economy, and which is what we all want, because we always hear the stats around, you spend €10 in a local store and it generates €25. Well, to have that €25 generated, you need strong suppliers, you need food producers, you need all of those being able to spend in the store as well. So having balance in negotiations with suppliers, I think, is important as well. So that's the MORE. That's
very good.
Yeah, that's
very good. I've just jotted that down because I'll just have it posted underneath just as a reference. And I think that the point you brought up around suppliers, and I seen this when I was working with a collective group of health stores, was around that relationship that you said there with the suppliers. And I think sometimes leaning into them to get support from a marketing perspective, that you don't have to use your own budget. They can support with an in-store tasting, they can support with in-store marketing. So leveraging those relationships, and even if they have a newsletter, or they have a customer database, or they have a really strong social media platform, leverage that. Do an in-store promotional campaign, and then piggyback off the back of these suppliers. So it needs to be a relationship where it's a give and take. And I think
completely.
Yeah, and when that imbalance occurs, that's where we're not seeing both get what they want. But I do think those relationships with the suppliers is crucial. And I worked with a group many years ago, the Kilkenny group, and we worked with a lot of local suppliers.
Yeah,
But
super,
Owen,
super
they
business.
had a
Yeah.
really good relationship. Each store manager at a local level would have
Yeah.
actually known the suppliers by name if a customer came in with a broken, and this is, Irish art pieces. They're a high price point to some of the pieces, but if they
Mhm.
came in that we had the relationship with the buyer, we could pick up the phone and say, you know what, this has happened, and we could support in that function. So I think that's really important, and the suppliers are a customer to you too. Just remember that, as you are to them.
It's
So
completely, that's
because
it,
you're selling
completely.
each other, it's a so that relationship should be strong in my eyes, and as a non-negotiable. I think it's important. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely
Yeah.
concur with that. And like I think we're looking at
Mm.
Irish retailers in particular, and they're competing with international retailers. So you want that value piece, getting back to that value piece,
Mm.
having that upweighted customer service,
Yeah.
differentiating yourself because you've
Mm.
got Irish suppliers, and people recognize the provenance of the product, being able
Yeah.
to engage the after sales. All of that is critical. It's really, that's what differentiates and will differentiate the retailers in the marketplace. So being able to pick up that phone and to have that quick conversation
Mm.
sorted out for the customer, really, really important. So
Yeah.
it's a relationship business, and it's about making sure that those relationships are nurtured and that's again it's that investment in time again, for
Mm.
the retailers and the owners of the business, is making sure that they're giving themselves time to not just focus on customer, but you're focusing on staff, you're focusing on suppliers,
Mm.
all of those things, that they're equal, all three equal, because that's what will give you the rounded proposition.
Yeah, I love that. Owen, we've nearly come to the end, and look, we've gone in so many directions with it. It's been
Yeah,
great
yeah, yeah.
because
Thanks, Louise.
it's
Yeah.
been really, really interesting. Um, I suppose, any top tip you could give before we wrap up for today, that you could give a retailer? You touched on key areas, I suppose, of relationships being important, culture, which I think is critical, development plans, and again, success and succession, which I liked. You
Yeah.
mentioned that. What does that look like? And then we looked at your more acronym. Is there any tip that you could give a retailer out there that's maybe listening in, maybe they're struggling a little bit, I suppose, around supports available, Own, because probably something that we didn't touch on, and obviously you're in that sector yourself. Is there any tips you give for supports for retailers out there?
Yeah, I think that the first tip I would say is not to be afraid to pick up the phone, be it to your financial advisor, be it to your tax consultant, be it to your banker, the Leo office, the local chamber. I think it's having the confidence that you're not our representative group, whatever. It's act quickly in terms of that. The last thing you want is to probably feel, I'll go through this on my own. I'll work it out. I'll get to the end, and it piles up. So I think it's about lifting up the phone or arranging the meeting. You will find people that are out there that want to support you. Look, you can pass my details on, Louise. More than happy to take a call from anybody, because they're all different in terms of the different problems. They all require a different nuance or a different type of engagement. So I don't want to give like a one size fits all.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
think that
100% agree with that.
taking the first step is about actually, by recognizing that there's a problem there, and by getting in touch with somebody, that's taking the first step. And then that person would be able to put the hands up and say, look, this isn't my area, but I'll direct you to somebody else. And I think we do have a very collegiate sector where people are supporting people that are under pressure. And we do want our local retailers and our Irish retailers to sustain, because going back to the outset, it's a virtuous economy. It's one that's creating 300,000. It's a sector that's active in the community, creating employment, generating a sense of community in so many areas around the country. So I think we want to maintain and preserve that. The first step is to actually recognize that I may have a problem here, and I need to speak to somebody, and to be proactive around that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a million for that, Owen. And I think Owen touched in there on his last point, which was around asking the question, be curious, have a curiosity in finding is there different ways of doing things to get a different result. Because if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to get the same result over and
Absolutely.
over again. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and there is supports out there. So I think that's important. Owen, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can get me on LinkedIn, Owen Clifford. You can find me on the Bank of Ireland website,
Mhm.
or look, Louise, I'm happy for you to pass my email address as well, owen.clifford@boi.com, Owen with an O. But that's the easiest way to get me.
Okay.
Look, I think if you Google me as well, you'll see probably come up some articles I've written across the national dailies and stuff like that, and my contact details will be on those as well. So happy for that.
Thank
Happy
you.
to take a call anytime.
Thank you so much. And thanks for your time, Owen. It was great to have you on today and shone a light, I suppose, on the retailers there that you've gone out, and brilliant to see that you're on the road speaking to all those retailers,
Yeah.
which is really, really super to see. Thank you so much for your time, Owen, and see you soon.
Thanks, Louise.